He is a long term radio announcer who made the shift to podcasting almost a decade ago, having hosted several different format podcasts and helped nurture a few others. He decided to take his producing and presenting experience to help create even more podcasts and create the podcast virtual assistant business, the podcast Butler. Now he helps podcasters from conception to creation and all the way through to marketing their shows. Please welcome Sam Blacker.
Hello, really good to be here. First up, I will acknowledge, just like Kerry and Vince, I am not going to be using a slideshow. I'm a bit more of a talker. I like to have a bit more fun that way. I'll also acknowledge, much like Vince, I am bald, but I think that's where our similarities will probably end. Now, I'll get into me in a second, but I want to preface this by saying when I start talking, I am both right and wrong. You don't have to listen to me. I hope you do, though. The podcasting space is full of a lot of radio people like myself. Some of them have been here for a while. Some of them are a little newer. And while I'm one of them, the problem with radio people is that in radio, we tend to believe in hard and fast rules. If you do this, you'll get your listeners. If you do that, your show won't work. And as radio people have entered the podcasting space, they've brought that kind of mindset with them. And the problem is that podcasting isn't a world of black and white. As we all know, podcasting is a world of nuance and difference. For the first time in decades, we have this easily accessible entertainment format that can represent a crazy wide range of people. So rules in our world are more of a guideline. Not to have a dig, I know plenty of radio people who are in the industry and we're doing a great job. It's just we come in with that mindset, and I want to have that sort of set at the beginning. There are not many blanket rules in podcasting that apply to everyone. People can tell you what worked for them and how it worked for others that they know. And you should definitely listen to that and then determine if that applies to you, because it might not. That's the beauty of podcasting. If someone tells you that it has to be this way, they could be wrong. Now, what do I know about this? Well, I've been around Australia and the world of commercial radio for almost a decade. I've been across multiple formats, dealing with entirely different demographics, old, young, target, hit, community. And I'm very experienced in targeting an audience and also doing storytelling. And one of the gifts, I guess, of doing a regular radio show is that if you like to figure things out by process and elimination like I do, you have to do that a lot faster. Doing 5 shows a week makes you work through all your mistakes very fast, rather than do it maybe once a week or anything like that. So I've taken that process to podcasting too. I've been overseeing panels, co-hosting, interview, solo narration, and all the other formats of podcasting. And each time I've had a chance to improve and learn how it can work for others and in different ways. I've taken that experience to use it to run the Podcast Butler, a virtual assistant business that also helps podcasters from beginning to end. And I use that when running the online community that you can be involved in if you're an Australian. Aussie Podcasters, the Facebook group there. It's a new, fast-growing community in it for Australian-based podcasters. So, getting into this, I just want to say one last bit before we get to what I really want to talk about, which is your podcast ideas and how to make sure you got the best one. But let's look at first what you're up against. Again, I believe that podcasting can work differently for every show, and you can come up with a wildly unique idea. But before we get to your idea, look, I mean, you got your stats, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people already. I've seen a few people mention stats. You can hear more people mention stats, whether it's the millions of shows or episodes, whether it's Australia-wide or worldwide. The overall message is there's a lot of podcasts out there. So you're a fish in a big sea. It's already a big enough reason to make sure you create an engaging podcast to stand out. But there is another big reason to make sure you don't get lost in that sea of fish, and that is celebrities. Unfortunately, in Australia, I know of at least one big company that genuinely believes small independent podcasters are a dying breed. They think that big names are the only way of the future for podcasting. Unsurprisingly, this company with its hard and fast rule has some radio connections. Now, we have celebrities doing interview formats, narration formats, panel and co-host formats. And if you weren't already in a sea of millions of podcast episodes, now you're in a sea of millions of podcast episodes, and there are fish much, much bigger than you. But it's not the end of the world. It's podcasting still so wide and diverse. It's brilliant. So there is a solution. Again, another little preface. If you want to do a podcast for fun, ignore everything I'm saying. No matter what I say, just do it. The beauty of podcasting is it is open for everyone and everything, which is awesome. You may not get wild success, but if you're doing it for fun, that doesn't matter. A lot of us tend to lose focus on that sometimes, especially in the professional industry. If you want growth, it starts, though, with the very initial podcast concept that you start with. And I'm going to say something that sounds like a rule, so treat it like a guideline. If your podcast is just going to be you and a friend talking about things and sharing stories, you're probably not going to get many listeners. They don't know you. So why would they want to listen to you? What reason do they have to be listening? So first off, you need to figure out your thing or your niche or your angle. And I know a lot of people already have been talking about this, and that's sort of what I want to get into a fair bit. You need to make your show about something and then be able to stick to it. And I want to run through how you're able to do that. So first off, I think this is really important. When you're planning an ongoing show and you're brainstorming ideas and you're throwing various things out there, the show, if you're doing a consistent show, is going to require you to be talking about the same thing over and over again in some capacity. So your podcast has to either be about something you know well and are willing to talk about, or it has to be something you want to know well and are willing to talk about as you learn it. For instance, I did a podcast called Shame Feeder years ago. It came about because I was trying to think of an idea and I just kept thinking about things I was ashamed of. And I tunneled into that and I came up with a whole podcast around shame and success. But once you've settled on a broad topic or idea, shame or maybe something else, it's time to focus on it. Keep some of your other interests and ideas off to the side there. They may come back. You might be able to use those. But for now, you need to tunnel in. So I guess this is a very broad example, but say you like movies. That's great. But there's so many movie review podcasts out there. So you're going to have to tunnel down and focus it a bit further. Maybe you want to look at genres. What genres of movies do you like? Well, action movies are your thing? Brilliant. Unfortunately, there's still a whole bunch of action movie review podcasts. So let's tunnel even further. Maybe one of your other side interests, the ones that we shelved over before, is fitness. Awesome. You could actually combine those and start doing something around fitness and action movies. Maybe the stunts. You could do a podcast where you start looking at the stunts in an action movie. You break down in that one movie in that one episode. What workouts would you need to do to be able to do that sort of thing? Suddenly you've got a podcast about fitness and stunt movies. You're actually spanning two genres and you may get an even bigger audience there as well. You can go even further. So you've gone movies, genre, subgenre, next level down. You could, if you like fitness, count all the steps people take in a movie and have a running tally of which movies have the most steps. That's maybe a little too niche, but I just want to give an example. You can keep going. Maybe then go back to one of the previous ideas, but just keep exploring and working that out. The idea before has plenty of room to work with. I mean, you could even have special guests from gyms or actual stunt people as extra content. It would be a really good niche to work in. Another example, very quickly, say you like dogs. What are your favorite dogs? These are questions you ask yourself. Then you go down to, could you be convinced of other dogs doing better? Cool. Well, maybe you do a series to find the best dog breed. This could be a bit of a piss take where you have guests arguing for their breed. You treat it like a tournament. Listeners vote after the arguments are held, but each episode is around between two dogs, narrowing it down. It's dumb. It could be fun. If you like I had a look when I was trying to come up with that example about dog-based podcasts, and there's a lot there already. So you need to find how you can stand out. Dog tricks, done. Celebrities and their dogs, done. What else? Maybe a dog competition. Once you have your overall idea, then you have to start really examining it again, making sure that it'll work. There's a test I like to do to make sure the idea will gain traction if you're looking for success. And that is to go up to a friend or family member or teacher or whatever, a dog, if you have a psychotic episode and it talks back to you, and explain your podcast to them in one sentence. Now, that can be hard, but when it comes to this, the celebrity podcasts already have an edge on you. For example, if I go up to someone and say, check out this podcast with Orlando Bloom, that's all I need to say. Fans of Orlando Bloom, or really anyone who's watched Lord of the Rings on Netflix in Australia at the moment, will go check it out because they're a little bit interested. It doesn't take too much to explain, so the ability for that show to spread by word of mouth is quite high. You don't have that big name factor unless you are a celebrity watching this. Then hi, hit up thepodcastbutler.com. But if you're not a big name, you need your listeners to be able to turn to their friend. So your existing listeners turn to their friend and say, I listened to this podcast where a guy interviews scientists while they try to shoot him with paintballs or something like that. I don't do that show, but if someone does, that's a dynamite idea. Steal it, go with it. I would love to hear it. If it can be explained in one sentence, it leaves people thinking, what the hell does that sound like? And it doesn't take your existing fans too much effort to convince people to listen. Because we've all been there, right? Like when they've got a TV show or a podcast, we try explaining the plot to a friend. And because it's complicated or there are twists you can't explain, you immediately see your friend's face start to glaze over. And you start doubling down. You get more determined. You're like, no, really, you have to watch it. But they have already written it off because there was too much in the explanation. The hook wasn't there at the beginning. And your listeners aren't professional promoters. So you need to make it as easy as possible to promote. And that starts with the very concept. That concept needs to be clear and easy to understand so your listeners can go off and explain it. Make it a specific niche, but also make it very easy to explain. Now, I don't recommend doing any of this in a vacuum. Trying to come up with an idea is really hard. So use your friends and family to bounce ideas off, but also use creators like us. So in commercial radio, we'll sit around and we'll talk about creative ideas, and we know we're working in that space and we know which angle we're going in, so we can help each other out. This isn't a podcast idea, but we did a radio promotion where we wanted to, it ended up being a drive-in spray tan event to raise money for a charity. Now, we didn't know what it was going to be at the beginning. We thought we knew something about spray tans. That's all we knew. And then we had people in the group bouncing back ideas and questions, being like, well, what is it about spray tans? We were going into winter, brilliant. A lot of people, the women with the festivals we had coming around at the time wanted more spray tans. How can we make that more effective? Drive-through, drive-in spray tans, just a hit and run sort of situation. And suddenly we were up and running. We had more ideas and we started going down through the feasibility of how it would work further from there. And that's what you need to be doing with your podcast. I've got a few clients, business clients or business podcasts. Like there's a real estate guy who just wanted to just talk about real estate. And I had to say, I'm sorry, I know you're passionate about it. A lot of people are doing that. And you need to figure out a way to make yourself stand out. You need to come up with something a little bit different. So we focused, this isn't a big shift either. What we did was we focused on the region that he was in. So the region that he's in at the moment has, like a lot of Australia, a big housing crisis at the moment. Houses are too expensive. A lot of people are struggling to buy. So we made it about that time, and we called it My Home. And it was advice specific to that region. He had people from different industries. There's different segments coming through. He gave a lot of advice, and he still continued to do that, but he started his initial short series. That is the other thing as well that you need to decide as part of your concept. And it's one of the big framing things is, what is your podcast going to be? Is it going to be ongoing? Is it going to be series? Is it going to be random? Highly don't recommend doing random, but coming up with ideas and figuring out what you're going to do will depend on that framework as well. And then that comes back to what your personal time's like. A lot of people are going to be talking about this. I know Steve Stewart was talking about how you don't have a lot of time and you could get a lot of pod fade. You can get over fatigued with your podcast work. And that's where getting other people to help can come in. You want to make sure that you can keep it going. So don't go for too long with don't don't plan a weekly podcast if you can't keep that up. I do a fortnightly podcast at the moment. Highly recommend it. It's fine. I've maintained audience, and I looked at that when I was first developing my podcast idea. And that podcast is I Work with a Nightmare, where I talk to people who anonymously share stories of toxic coworkers and bosses. I looked at that and I said, is that something that can work fortnightly? Totally fine. Don't need that weekly. People will argue and sometimes tell you have to be weekly. It depends. As I said at the beginning, there's no hard and fast rule. It all depends on you and your individual podcast. So that was something I had to consider when I was considering my podcast concept. And again, if you're doing something around news, it's probably going to have to be at least weekly because it's going to have to be timely. When it comes to this, though, I mentioned already friends and family to help you bounce around these ideas. They're not necessarily professional content creators, though. So you can turn to people like myself and our team at the Podcast Butler, podcast creators or virtual assistants, producers are experienced in asking the right questions to be like, cool, that's your idea. What else is there in that idea? Like the questions I was asking before. Cool, you like movies. What genre do you like? Okay, what do you like about that genre? You like the stunts. Okay, do you like fitness? Cool. It saves you having to ask yourself those questions because you may not even know what questions to ask yourself. Having that second voice, that second person out there to prompt you and to push you can be incredibly helpful. So I'm going to be wrapping this up in a second, but just reiterating my main points is basically, one, you are in a big sea of fish and there are some bigger fish out there. So you need to stand out, and standing out comes with starting your first podcast, coming up with your podcast idea. Now that can be anything, but try to make sure to Google, check it out, see what else is out there. Make sure you're not doing something that already exists, or if it exists, what can you do to make it a little bit different? Tunnel down into your niche, bounce it off with other people, and then do that final test where you turn to your friends and family and try to explain your idea in one sentence. If you get it right, if they look at you and they go, cool, that sounds great, brilliant. Maybe second test to that, go to a friend of a friend, someone who's not necessarily going to bullshit you and be supportive, and give them that sentence again and see what they say. Or if you have an honest friend, go to an honest friend. And if you need help, hit us up at thepodcastbutler.com or any of there's plenty more in this conference. Podfiesta has a bunch of great virtual assistants and producers who are involved, and they're going to be able to 100% help you both of those questions and then additional support going forward. So thank you for hearing me out. Good luck with whatever your idea ends up being. I know it'll be killer, and just remember to have fun. And then now I think we'll do that awkward thing where we wait while the takeover happens. I know I've brought this in a little early, so fingers crossed someone's there to take over. Sorry if I'm not, guys, but I can babble for a little longer. I brought that in a little early, I'm afraid. Okay. I should apologize as well for Freaky JT in the background.
Real person, by the way. I thought it was a real person when I saw you. I was like, is someone behind him? Is that the point of JT being there behind you?
JT is my little trophy. I was made redundant from a commercial radio station once, and I nicked him from the studio. Oh, I keep forgetting I'm married. I nicked him from the studio and took him with me. And he just lurks creepily in the background, freaking out new clients, which is a lot of fun.
It creeped me out, actually. I was like, hold up. Is that the real person?
I planned too many preface notes at the beginning, and I didn't warn anyone about JT. Sorry about that one.
I was just shy to chat it. Was like, was there really someone behind him? Anyway, thank you so much, Sam. And at this juncture, the participants who have questions for you may go to Hop-In session question and answer platform, and you can ask your questions to Sam right about there. We'll have a short break because we'll have a short break. Just a short, it's okay. It's a short comfort room break or a lunch break or a dinner break. Get your snacks, guys, and we'll be back in a short while. Thank you again, Sam.
Cheers.